Next, I would like to invite Mr. Levy to the podium. Mr. Levy and I just met first time, but we have a mutual friend, Sam Owens, a good friend of mine for a long time. Actually, he's the one who introduced. I know this is a Jewish holiday, Sabbath today, but I mean, this is wonderful, such a graceful that you share this evening time with us. This is going to be part of the Korean-American history. That this is it worked tremendously, that impact the Korean-American history. So I want you to know that the media we're going to cover years to come. And so thanks so much. I would like to ask your opinion about the suggestion about the Korean-American community.
Thank you.
Please. Thank you.
As Mr. Park said, we've never met before. It's a pleasure to meet you. I admire your evident enthusiasm and your evident commitment to these issues. It's terrific. I also have to tell you that I agree entirely with your love of Woody Guthrie's song, "This Land Is Your Land." It is a beautiful song. If I had my druthers, it would replace the Star-Spangled Banner as the national anthem. I think it is a song about everybody in this country owning this country, and I think that's a beautiful message, and I'm pleased to share that with you. I will say also that this is my first time to ever think about issues of Korean Americans, to meet with Korean Americans as a group, not to mention such illustrious members of the Korean American community. And I'm very pleased to be here today. And I thank you, Mr. Park, for inviting me. I also want to say that I have never before met a general, the United States general, much less sat next to him and followed him on a panel, and that is truly an honor, and that is a remarkable thing for me about this day too. General Ellis, it's good to meet you. My friend Sam Owens has spoken regularly at these panels over the years. Sam is the former Attorney General of the state of Georgia, and he has, I believe, spoken at a number of these panels in Atlanta, if that's correct. And he's a wonderful man. And when he reached out to me, he asked me to be here in large part as a member of the American Jewish community, and to think about many of these perspectives as a person who is the descendant of immigrants and who's thought about a lot of these issues about joining American life and also maintaining our own identities while joining American life. And I'm glad that I had the chance to think about these questions. America has been a great place for American Jews. Our love for this country is great, but we have faced anti-Semitism here, just as we as Jews faced anti-Semitism all around the world. I think one of the things that's very distinctive about Jews is that we don't identify with the countries that we came from, for the most part, because for the most part, those were countries that wanted to kill us. And that's, for the most part, why our ancestors came here. My grandmother remembered pogroms as a little girl in Russia. Most of our family was lost, who remained in Europe, was lost in the Holocaust. So the identity transforms to a religious identity rather than a national identity, which is a very complicated thing, and a very complicated thing to explain to your children when they say to you, when I tell them that they're half Russian, they say, "Oh, so then we're Russian." And I say, "No, we are not Russian. We are Jewish," and I make that very plain to them. So it is a very different identity. We have faced anti-Semitism here, just as Asians have faced tremendous discrimination in this country. During World War II, despite the awareness of the American government of what was happening in Europe, they refused to reduce quotas to allow more Jews into this country and to save those Jews from death. I am not equating these things by any means, but relatively recently we had men with torches marching through the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, chanting, "The Jews will not replace us." But I say all of that noting that discrimination lives here. We all know that. It continues against Asian Americans. It continues against Jews. It continues against African Americans, who are the three major groups facing hate crimes in New York City, in our own city. The issue that Mr. Park asked me to address today, and it was a fascinating question to me because I had not realized that this was a question that deserved this kind of thought, and it's a very, very interesting question, which is how can Korean Americans build a larger identity in America beyond being primarily Korean to being perhaps, I don't know if you would put it this way, Mr. Park, but being primarily American. And maybe all of you would say to me today, Harlan, we are primarily American. That's what we are. I don't know what you would say, but I think that you were talking in part about building a profile in the larger world as being predominantly American. So that's what I tried to give some thought to today. How can Korean Americans build a broader role outside their community in other communities that they live in New York City, New York State, other cities, other states, and a broader profile as Americans? And I've thought about that, and I'm happy to offer some thoughts on that. I would, though, first like to comment on what I view as some similarities that I think that Jews and Korean Americans share. A tremendous focus on education and the education of our children. A tremendous focus on learning, which is not always the same thing as just studying, but a focus on learning in school, a hard work, and the stress that comes with being the representative of a people when you stand out and walk out in the greater world. I remember as a young child going to a religious school for the first several years of my life, and the rabbis saying to us, when you're out in the community, you're representing us, and what you do represents on us as Jews. And it's a big burden, and it results in a lot of self-conscious children who are very focused on being good and being seen as good. And I think, Mr. Park, that part of the challenge we're noting here is how the Korean Americans who are good people get the rest of the world to notice what a good people they are in America and build on that. And people can always notice what we do that's wrong, but they don't always notice what we do that's good, and how to make sure that all the good we do gets seen rather than hidden away. And I think part of that is playing a broader role in the larger community and the larger country. So here's my to-do list in terms of realizing what I'll call the Sunny Park agenda. How to get out there in the broader world. When I think about the business people in this room, I think particularly, and I'm sure you think about this already, about charitable organizations and nonprofit organizations and service organizations that have broader focus than simply the Korean American or the Asian American community. New York and the country is full of those kinds of organizations. I think that by volunteering for those organizations, to figure out how you can join the boards of those organizations, and even perhaps for your organization to think about how, as an organized strategy, your organization, the people here, to think perhaps, and I would never presume to suggest what you should do, but to strategize about how you can get people, how you can create links to get people on boards of directors, to be out there in the broader world. These broader, this strategy would be a strategy that reflects the classic role of boards of directors as places where people go both to do good in the world and also to develop connections with other people who are doing good and to build a network of relationships through that step. This may in part reflect my background, but I think that a very good way to identify yourself as a New Yorker or as an American is through public service. And I, as a lawyer, think about lawyers. I think about lawyers who, as young people, become assistant district attorneys, as I did, or become public defenders, or who, like my wife, was for many years a judicial law clerk in the state court system. And these public-facing roles put you right in the midst of the mainstream of lawyers who aren't simply sitting in their office trying to figure out how to win cases for their clients, which is what I do day to day pretty much all the time. And I don't say anything to diminish it. I'm proud of it. But I spent, I think, 13 years in public service, and it's a good way to define yourself as a person who's interested in contributing to your community. It's a way to get terrific experience, and it's a way to build a more public life if you want to do that kind of thing. It can lead to a judgeship. It's common for many people to go to judgeships after holding those kinds of positions. And look, the judgeship route, it's an immense amount of work to get there, but there are these steps that people who want to get there can take as building blocks when they're younger lawyers. There are impediments that I want to talk about around joining the broader world. One of them is fear of rejection. All minorities face that. And one of them is, I know there was some discussion of assimilation as perhaps something that could be defined as a goal before. General Ellis, we can talk about that before, because I certainly sensed some ambivalence when you talked about the whole concept of assimilation. But I think that just as there is a fear of rejection, I certainly know from the community that I grew up in that there was a fear of assimilation. My late mom used to tell me at various points that I was part of a people who, just like you, are part of a people who go back for thousands of years and have traditions, religious, cultural, that are fundamental to our lives, to your life and my life, and that it was very important to maintain that chain, to not be the person who breaks that chain, who breaks the link in that chain. And there was the concern, I think, that we would, by entering the broader world, as my parents had already begun to do, that we would end up damaging the long-term traditions of our family. I think that part of the challenge of the goal that you described is to have the courage to engage with the rest of the world, to do that, and to remain American Jews and to remain Korean Americans. So on that note, I will close. Thank you.